Welcome back to the Bravery Blueprint. I have my partner Brian Ellis with us, and we're excited about today's guest. Today's guest is Sergeant Jeff Daukas. He's a 25-year law enforcement veteran. He's a regional representative of Mission First Alliance and an expert in the area of ethics training and consulting. He's done a lot more than that. We're excited to have him on the show. Sergeant Jeff Daukas, how are you doing, sir?
I'm good. It's good to be here. Brian, Travis, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate your time. And let's chop it up. Let's talk leadership and let's talk about how to make things better. How about that for a summary?
Well, Brian and I run the show, but Jeff, we'll take that into consideration. We do appreciate that. but all joking aside, you've done so much. We can't mention it all, but walk us through your career up until now, because obviously you've had a diverse career inside investigations, promotion. You're on the streets every day for our listeners. He's on the streets every day. He's leading men and women every day in law enforcement. Walk us up to this period in time.
Sure. So I started in 99. I was a probation officer. And right before 9/11, I realized that I had to do more than just be a probation officer. I was working in a group of people in the gang unit. We interacted with our law enforcement partners on the police side every day. And I just saw their look on their face, and they looked quite literally without hope. And I thought, I can do something, I can help. So I got in shape and got hired in my agency in 2002, transitioned into that role, did pretty much what everybody does. I did the patrol deal. I was a field training officer and a detective for 7 years, from property, fraud, pawn, bank robbery, and homicide. In the middle of that, I was a protest negotiator for a long time, and then I got promoted. So then they, of course, were willing to give me the protest unit because high liability. And they said, let's go ahead and give it to the new sergeant. Let's let him do that and do the patrol thing. So I did that for a long time. I ran our field training unit. I ran an investigation unit that actually started in 2009. So that was kind of cool to run that. And now I'm back with my people on day shift, weekends off, not trying to get guys to slow down, but trying to get them to figure out that this is not breakfast all morning long. So yeah, we're doing a lot of fun stuff here in our agency.
The old day shift patrol. You got to get the breakfast place right out of squad meeting, and then you got lunch about 11 o'clock, right? So yeah, it's great stuff.
Yeah. So it's a good thing. I've been involved in tactics training and leadership training. I've been in our training unit for 22 years. Since I started, I came over from probation as a trainer of people how to teach, and I have a master's in criminal justice. I speak at the colleges, and I've taught for 4 years over there. Did a lot of leadership schools, a lot of training. In fact, you and I were just at Magna Sovea together in Pinal County, so that was a fun time. And the critical thing I think that we talk about all the time is that Dr. Travis Yates, the 4th times 100, doesn't matter if the people in front of you don't see you as Travis. It doesn't matter the titles in front of our name or the letters behind until people can be genuine and real and transparent. Sure, it's nice that we have all this experience, and you guys have more experience than I do. But if you're not using that experience to help other people, then what are you doing? You're prideful, you're arrogant, and you're all about rank rocketing. And frankly, I don't have time for that.
Yeah, man, Jeff, you hit on a bunch of things that are near and dear to me. And the first, I was a probationary officer put on senior day shift patrol, and those poor guys that I worked with, I probably owe them all literally multiple breakfasts for what I did to them in the early mornings during that year, because I was out looking for bad guys, and these guys were just trying to eat. And right. I now looking back at being retired, I'm like, oh, those poor SOBs. I was just not. I was like a young kitten with an old cat. You just leave me alone, right?
Every once in a while, they paw you in the face and move you along.
100%. Well, one of the things that Travis said is, that I picked up on in regards to your background is ethics. And there's a lot of talk when you think about ethics, you're thinking about courage and temperance and justice and wisdom. And the sad thing is if you look at leadership in organizations, we tend to make the same mistakes over and over and over again because we're not doing a really good job at passing, succession planning. We're not doing a good job of you know, I can at least look back in my own organization, and we'd have general orders that were like, hey, why does this say this? Well, because nobody has the real meaning of what happened that led this up to it. People are like, well, this doesn't seem to work. And sometimes that might be the case, and other times it doesn't. And that's why Dr. Javidi and I recently wrote our most recent piece. We actually are trying to add a new word to the English dictionary, and that's magnicity. And that's because there's a lot of power in words. And if you really think about the English language, you know, you think about the role of, you know, words that have ship in them, like leadership and friendship and citizenship. You know, these are like nouns that describe a state or a condition, or, you know, a quality. And the fact that when we say leadership, we're telling people what we aspire to be, but we're not telling them kind of what to do. And so we coined this word magnicity, because if you think about city, adding SITY to the end of a word, it makes it an inner quality, right? It's the mastery over oneself, and really trying to figure out what is it that you want to do on a daily basis. And I think that really you start to think about, you know, the emotional symphony that you have in yourself and your mind over matter. And I really think that I get so inspired sitting here thinking about, I do all this work a lot of times down in my basement alone, you know, trying to take to the depths of thought. But I see people like yourself that are still out pounding the pavement, and that really feel the amazing desire to put in action what they're learning. And that gives me so much hope and inspiration for the future of policing. So yeah, really, maybe after the last couple of minutes, I was a blowhard to that, you know, and just wanted airtime. But at the same time, it's a homage to the, like, it's refreshing to see somebody who's really trying to make a conscientious effort to push leadership forward.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And, you know, I accept that. So bravo to you, sir. Words matter. I've always said that my whole life. Words matter, and how you choose to use them matters infinitely. And I'm going to tell you something that all of us have heard for years, but people don't finish it. It's a 3-part paradigm that I started saying years ago when I was teaching college classes with 18-year-olds next to 40-year-olds. So apart from becoming really good at understanding generational aspects, you had to learn how to communicate with people. And what I would tell these men and women, these really young adults, barely adults, to these, you know, old people like I am now, I would say, you know, knowledge applied is wisdom, but wisdom when it fails is a lesson. And so that's the issue right there. And so our leadership, and I'm just going to say general, our leadership, because it isn't just in my agency or your agencies that you guys worked for, it is very consistent to say, okay, knowledge puffed up produces pride, and pride produces a bunch of cool awards and classes and challenge coins and pictures on your I love me board. Okay. But you apply that knowledge correctly. Now you have wisdom. So you think you're Gandalf. You think you're this amazing gray wizard. And so you walk into a room with overstated confidence because of things that have been poured into you. And you believe then that because of that, you can go ahead and do whatever you want, instead of realizing that the real change, as you said, the magnicity comes from inside. Having mastery of yourself inside is the driver for ethics. And that last part, wisdom that fails, is a lesson. And what I see it doesn't really matter, really, and I don't really think it's a title issue, is that people are constantly all around me, they fail. I told my guys I fail every single day. I failed a couple times today that I know of, and I'm sure times that I wasn't even aware of, where these people then, they blame everyone else. Like, well, no, it can't be me because I'm a commander, I'm a chief, I have a doctorate, I have this, I have a full head of hair. Sorry, guys, I don't really have that either. But, like people want to walk away from the idea that there's ownership and accountability to having wisdom to do something productive with it. And I got it. And I'm not going to keep talking all the time. I'll shut up eventually. But Travis knows how I get when I get on a roll. I will tell you this. You mentioned the word, that last suffix of ship at the end of things. And you were saying what's a noun describes things. I was thinking the parallelism is between potential energy and kinetic energy. Leadership, citizenship defines a state of being. But it also, in my mind, it should have action. Leadership put in motion is the ball that's on top of the hill, potential energy that rolls down the hill. Now it's kinetic energy. Leadership in action is a verb, and it's a verb that should be empowering to you and everyone around you. And when you start infusing leadership as an action and not as a title on your wall, then you see real change with people's hearts. And again, it doesn't matter if you're a chief or you're an officer or you're a consultant doing whatever, because I've seen it at all levels where people that put that into action, all of a sudden they're having real conversations and men and women open up to them and they're watching lives change and they walk away blown away. And as you guys know, they're on cloud 9 the rest of the day because they were interacting at the right level. What do you think about that?
Well, you've been to all this leadership training, Jeff, and I think everybody probably here and watching would agree there's a gap in law enforcement. There's a gap between the knowledge we have and the practice that we're seeing. I think this profession is hurting in many ways because of the lack of practical leadership. Do you see what is the disease there? What's going on, do you think, that we seem to be more concerned with plaques on the wall and status than versus actual leadership?
Well, I'll tell you, Brian, I think uncorked something that people talk around, but they don't talk about. And it's really the idea that if you're going to do something, if you're going to try to affect change, you're going to be involved in someone's life, you have to take it, you have to own it. Yeah, there is a gap because at some level, people are, I just think of like the scales of justice, right? Just think of the scales hanging on either side. And I told my wife about this the other day as I was talking with a young guy I'm mentoring. I said, so you put your integrity, you put your ethics, you put the things that you say are valuable to you on one side. And then you put your job, you put your reputation, you put how people are going to view you, you put how many, I don't know, social media likes, whatever your thing is on the other side. And for some reason, you weigh those things and you look for, okay, is there going to be some equity? Is one going to hold higher than the other? Because, man, I'll tell you, I've watched the utilitarian thing where people, they pursue pleasure, they avoid pain. And so in that scenario, ethics rarely wins out. And I don't understand that. People are so caught up in career preservation that they're throwing marriages away. They're so caught up in the next best thing that they don't realize they're a closet alcoholic, or they're cheating on their spouse, or they're taking prescription stuff. They don't even care. How does that happen? The gap, Travis, that you're talking about occurred well before that. And I really believe, Brian, to your point, ethics, integrity, being the man or woman you say you are in private, that you are in public, matters infinitely. And it's the little things. It is always the little things that are the building blocks. It's like the Lincoln logs for the big house you want to build. So I think there's the gap, is that people are always evaluating how is their career, how is their status, how is their whatever, and they're actually putting it up against a scale system, when in actuality, it's the pyramid. Your ethics, integrity, your faith. For me, my faith is my driver. That's the base of your pyramid. Build up from there. Don't build down. I think that's the problem.
I think one of the challenges too, when I look back, is there's just a lot of people that are not just afraid to be themselves, right? And vulnerability. And I would like to think that vulnerability will become a leadership skill strength in the future. Because look, we're all human. I only know one human being that was perfect. And I
they don't work for your department.
No, they don't.
Him every day, but I have never met him in person. And so when I was working, the nice thing is I asked my troops what they wanted. Like, I was the guardrails, but I never told them. I never wanted to control I wanted people to have creative thought. And then at the same time, I didn't want to, I failed all the time. There was things I had one of the guys on my team, he constantly had to come over and fix my computer because I didn't know how to do it. And it became the team joke. Give him, I had all these mouses around my desk because I would take in Mongo is like, these things don't work. So you just got to own the things that you're good in and the things that you're not. And that's okay. It doesn't make you bad. It just makes you human.
But people don't want to talk good or bad, Brian. They want to talk strength or weakness in law enforcement. It's weak to do this. It's weak proceed to do this. Let me tell you a quick story. Just the other day, I went to the local QT. So hats off to Tulsa. Local QT, get a nice cup of coffee. I got my collagen, so I get my skin feeling great, get my protein. And I'm just chatting up the guys in there. And of course, it's morning time. And so I got a bunch of construction workers, day laborers, just blue collar guys and gals that are coming in. Mostly these dudes coming in wearing their Carhartt jackets because for us it's freezing. It's like 40 degrees, so we're dying right now, And I'm chatting up with these guys, and somebody's talking about a kid story, and I make a comment, and somebody's comment was, "Oh yeah, if my kid did that, I would kick their butt," and this and that. So I start talking to this guy, who I can read. I'm reading his ink on his neck, above his eyebrows, right? And I'm reading DOC everywhere. I'm reading his prison ink. And I know he's been inside, and I can even tell you where he was because of his ink. And a commander walks in because now it's about 6:30. So the commander's walking in. He's going to get his coffee. And he's like, he acknowledges me, but doesn't join in this conversation, which was, but a bunch of salty guys, robust. We're having this conversation. So I tell this guy, I'm like, hey, man, let me buy you a cup of coffee. Let's continue talking. He's like, all right. So I go up, and the commander's watching this. The guy looks at me and goes, I spent most of my adult life in prison for meth. And he stops and looks at me and looks at my name and goes, in fact, I think you arrested me 10 years ago. And he shook my hand. Commander's watching this, right? Doesn't intervene. Doesn't say anything. And I say, well, I guess it's good that we're doing this now. And we keep talking. And what we kept talking about was vulnerability. I said, brother, I'm a recovering alcoholic because I couldn't get past the things in my head that I saw in homicide and some of these bad things and bad situations. I just drank and drank and drank. So I understand what that's all about. And we're outside QT, and the guy starts crying. He tells me he's got full custody of his daughter now. He's given it all up. He has his own business. And he says, you know what? I really know that God's blessed everything that's going on. And I'm like, bro, my church is literally 3 blocks that way. I give him my church card, and I say, why don't you come sit with me and my family? As the commander's walking out, he's watching this. I said, come sit with me and my family, man. I'd love to be able to introduce you to some people and keep the conversation alive. But my name's Jeff. You can always call me that, not Sergeant. And the commander, you could just tell he's like, so he turns and walks away. Doesn't even say anything. This guy shook my hand again for like the 5th time. And as he's shaking my hand, he says, I don't ever meet cops like you, but I have a lot of respect for police officers, especially when they're open like you. And he had tears in his eyes, and he walked away. And I was thinking, I thought, that was the best conversation I'm probably going to have today. So why do I bring that up? One, because first of all, that's transparency. That's all of us just being human, like you said, Brian. But also, look who watched that happen and what the response was. Why was there not a response of like, hey, what are you guys talking about? I'm a commander. What business? Are you a local business? Can we partner with something? I mean, if I'm a commander, and I've never been a commander, you guys are commanders, but I say
it's not that complicated, Jeff. It's not that complicated, trust me.
You would think, though, that somebody would end up saying, hey, you know what? Why don't we just have a conversation like people? Or, hey, you know what, Sarge? Take all the time you need. I got this. But it just seemed like there was this weird gap, Travis, to your point, this weird ravine where, well, you guys are going to talk about that. I'm going to go and do important stuff. And I always think, man, the change into someone's soul right in front of you, that's the most important thing we can do ever. It just is.
Well, 100%. I mean, there's no the reality of it, there is no weakness. There's only opportunity, and
Mm,
it's a growth point for anybody, and we all have them. And what your story illuminates is, I mean, imagine a lot of cops can resonate. I mean, being nice to a criminal in my past saved my life. On our
mm,
next encounter, he had a gun and he didn't want to go back to jail. I mean, I've told that story 100 times to criminal justice students because
mhm.
it's real. You know, you can have compassion
Right.
um, and still do this job well. But the reality of it is we have to start looking for those opportunities. And I'm you know, forget the bravado stuff, because the bravado, you know, the John Wayne type things only get you so far. I mean, at the end of the
Mhm,
day, when you know, they say there's only a couple questions that people on their deathbed ask, and it
mm,
has to do with love and forgiveness. I mean,
mhm,
at the end of the day, so you know, kind of what are you doing to make sure I've what are you doing to make sure that you lead a internally peaceful life? And because at the end of the day, it's coming for all of us, and we get those choices. And but I don't think enough people are deeply thinking about these topics to the point that they're actually enhancing their workplace,
mm,
their their connection to other people,
mm.
their leadership capacity. Because quite frankly, every officer is a leader, and if they
Correct.
don't understand that yet, you know, now's the time. Today's the day.
Right.
As they say in Rocky 3, there is no tomorrow.
Mhm,
Today's the day.
right.
What do you think, Travis?
Yeah, I think we're doing the profession a disservice by making leadership a status, right?
Mhm,
When I have military folks in my class, I ask this question, I get the same answer wherever I'm at for decades. You know, when's the first time you start talking about leadership? And everybody in the military says day one. You ask a bunch of cops that, and they're going to say, when I got promoted, or when I passed a test, or they sent me to
mm,
this management school. We don't we don't make people in our profession feel like they can do what Jeff just did this day. That is leadership, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. It's not going to get you probably headlines in the paper and a speech at the ICP. But if every single officer just went out about their day to influence the people God put in front of them, the world changes. I mean, we're in a political
mhm,
season right now coming out of it where there's nothing but hatred and division, and it's nothing's my fault, it's everybody else's fault. Imagine what leadership could do in that area. Instead of these political leaders that lost, that gave speeches that basically said, we're going to keep fighting you and we don't accept this, blah, 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 blah. What if they said, maybe it's time we work together? Maybe it's time we lead this country, or lead each other, or lead our communities. We don't control them, but we control ourselves, right? And that's the beauty of law enforcement. Leadership's in every organization, but the beauty in law enforcement is there's no other profession where you could have the impact you can have in meeting people where they can be met. Sometimes their worst days, sometimes unexpected visits like that gentleman got today. So
mhm.
I see a lot of that wasted, guys. I see a lot in our profession that have that opportunity that waste it, kind of like the symbolic captain walking away or commander walking away, like Jeff just said.
Jeff, I got to ask a quick question, because you know I'd be curious, because I did my own little informal survey on the question I'm going to ask you, and that's just, do you think younger generations are just outward bound, talking to folks like everybody that they possibly can, or just interacting with the calls they get? You know,
Hmm.
what
Well,
what are your
so
thoughts?
well, I will tell you this. My my master's thesis was on how to get Gen X and millennials highest job satisfaction married with high work productivity, because I was running the FTO program with a bunch of Gen Xers and millennials. And I thought this is a practical topic. And oddly enough, there's scant little information that are peer reviewed and accepted for people to be able to draw from. So I created this thesis that I believe that everybody has this need inside of them for validation. And frankly, validation is simply showing up and listening into someone's heart. Really. I mean, you want to affirm somebody, just give them your time, right? So I think these men and women that are of a younger generation or older generation, because I run the senior squad, but I didn't always, and I'm seeing the same kind of issues because the inside of them is going, well, I'm here for a paycheck, or why would I do this when I know I could get in trouble and I know that my department won't back me, or I don't feel like the people in my chain of command will support me? Because I've watched these young guys who are, you know what I'm talking about. They're so excited. I mean, you tell them like, hey, there's, like you said before, being out there on the senior squad, you just had to run down and you were just going nonstop. I've seen those guys and gals just engage everyone, but they engage them from a different perspective. They engage them from that idea of like suspicion versus curiosity. Whereas because of our experience, because of the knowledge and the wisdom, and then the wisdom that's failed, we learn some lessons. Because I know that, I can see those guys at QT, instead of going, hey, I like your jacket, what's your name and date of birth, with my FI stack out, I can just chop it up with this guy as a person, knowing that building that first rapport is going to get me whatever I need later on. Like you said, it saved your life. So I think that the short answer is they're both. They're really both. And I coined the phrase Gen Mills, that you have, because I just talked to Police Academy, so funny, last week, and I said that I encapsulated that thought to these young officers, and some of them were in their 40s, so those are my people there. But I said, if you guys were to go ahead and just engage people where they're at, what do you think would happen? That's just the normal. What would happen if you were able to just to be yourself? I said, what happened if I told everybody I met, like, I'm open, like, yeah, I had an alcohol problem, I don't anymore. But I can tell you what that did to my family, and I can tell you what it could have done if I kept going. Like, what do you think would happen? And they just are like, I don't know.
Well, I say that because, you think, community-oriented policing was a big buzzword, it started in the 90s, but yet baby boomers did community-oriented policing all the time. I mean, they just talked to everybody, and everybody talked to them. And so, as a millennial, I kind of was still in that, hey, you just talk. And then towards the end of my career, I'd have a sergeant to put somebody out on a park check, and they go, the park's fine. Well, who'd you talk to? Well, we didn't talk to anybody. What do you mean you didn't talk to anybody? And which made me push to, go into the Starbucks that everybody hits right after roll call, and just sit in the corner incognito without my uniform on, to just, as a watch commander, kind of going, okay, well, what is everybody doing here? And they're on their phones, in line, and they're communicating each other, but there's all these people around, ripe fruit essentially to communicate with. And so I guess where I'm going with this is, if you look at some of the data right now, you go to 6seconds.org on, emotion, intelligence, emotional regulation, stress, and fragility in emotions. Our young people are hurting, like they're way off the charts compared to baby boomers and millennials in regards to their emotional regulation. They're way more talented than I ever could even imagine to be in regards to their technological prowess. But, it kind of goes hand in hand with, good leadership and everything else. If we really want a leadership forward, a feed forward future for all these folks, we do need to give them, that nurturing. And that time right now it's now, because they are our future leaders. And it just, if you look at the stats, it just doesn't look good on 6seconds.org.
Well, yeah, and you guys would agree too that the real life application of this comes in the day-to-day. It comes in the briefing. It comes with present supervisors. So I will say that I feel like the most important job in the police department, hands down, is your phase 1 FTO. That phase 1 training officer is going to set the culture, going to set, here are the expectations. Here's what we reward. Here's what we incentivize. Here's what we critique. And here's what we expect. Second most is your squad sergeant, hands down. And so by being present, by being on calls, I don't have to do a whole lot with these guys' decision-making skills, like their practical criminal justice knowledge, because they all have 20 plus years on. But I tell them, I go, your communicative abilities, your emotional intelligence. I use it a lot. I go, you guys don't have 20 years on. You have 2 years, 10 times. And they laugh at me. I say, you guys are not willing to just talk to people. Now, some of them are, and we're getting better, certainly on my squad, but they see me doing it. When I'm willing to, I said, hey, some young guys, I said, let's go and do an apartment complex walk. They go, and they said, why? I said, we're going to walk, talk to people. And they went, ooh, we're going to get people arrested on warrants. I go, no, you're not going to even get you're not going to write their names down, and you're not going to write their date of birth down. We're just going to go talk to people. And they went, why? I said, because we're going to go show them that every time a cop shows up, an arrest doesn't have to be made, or a warrant check isn't going to be run. Let's just go talk and find out. I said, I want you to ask these people, what do you think would make you feel safer? And what can we do to help that? Just ask them that. And they were really reluctant to do this, very reluctant. But I was out there leading the charge. They're kind of watching me, and then they just break off into their 8th grade dance thing. We finally crossed the floor, and about an hour and a half, we all kind of just frolic on back to our vehicles. And I said, okay, so what'd you guys learn? And before I could even set the question parameters to try to help draw out of them the answer I was looking for, they just started shooting off information. And this guy does this, and everybody was talking about that if we just focus on drugs in this area, or we like during the daytime, traffic is an issue. And they had all this information. And for about 15 minutes, I was just quiet. And after all the adrenaline burned out of them, I said, so do you think this was worth it, or do you think it wasn't? And they all just kind of went, thanks a lot.
Until
and
one of
they
the
went in separate ways.
The Sam Elliott mustache and the spider web tattoo on him. Like,
Yeah.
I gotta go talk to him.
Well, they went back. We went back the next week. I said, now let's go find the ones that they were talking about. Now we'll get their names and date of birth, and we'll see if they'll chat with us. Because the first time they're like, well, they're just going to talk to us anyway. They're not going to arrest us. And then, we were able to close the loop on a couple different outstanding warrants. But I think that's a key thing. They were not prepared. No one ever told them, Brian, that it was okay to talk to people. I was like, I grew up in a household where dad's Irish, mom's Italian, oldest of 4 boys. All you did was talk and fight and speak with your hands and eat. Yeah, we don't have that anymore.
Well,
We're training up a generation of dispatchers.
I don't know, Jeff. I mean, why would we need that with our fancy real-time crime centers and all the other fancy stuff we tout, right? We're getting away from this interpersonal, where leadership meets the road, right? Interpersonal skills, getting to know people.
Yeah, and that's the crux. In fact, if you remember, and I won't go through the whole thing because it's a long story, as you know, Travis, but just reading something that Travis wrote, Brian, I just reached out to him. I said, I really appreciate this. He responds back. I respond back. He said, hey, let's have a conversation. That was, I think, January 9th, 2023. And we talked for about 2.5 hours after that, later on the day. Just never met this guy before. He never met me. But we just started having open conversations about things that actually mattered, about people and about service. And that's the crux there. Greenleaf was not wrong in 1970 when he said servant leadership is a pathway to success. He wasn't wrong. The implementation of that has changed a lot since 1970. And not all of it for the good, right? So just some food for thought, I guess.
It just goes to show me again, when I said thank you for being who you are earlier on. I mean, you have curiosity, right? I've done the same thing. One of a good friend of mine, his name is Michael Lee Stollard. He wrote a book called Fired Up or Burned Out, and then he wrote another book called Connection Culture. And the same thing, I read his book, and I'm like, I have to talk to this guy, because it was one of those books it resonated with me. I was living parts of this book, and it's been a decade plus long friendship with a guy who's doing tremendous work, and it's all up to God's plan. So it's fantastic stuff. So I used to tell my cops, curiosity may have killed the cat, but it takes a lot of bad guys to jail. So make sure that keeps living in the realm of police work, because I think if the one skill that cops could have, I mean, it enhances your leadership too, is just be insatiably curious. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, that was the driver for me to get involved in all these different training things. I didn't recount all the trainings and the courses, but I'm constantly seeking to do these things that people say, why are you doing this? All the time it's, why don't you just retire? You can retire. And I think, well, I'm not ready to retire. I feel like old Tom Cruise in Maverick said, you know, the days come when you can't do this anymore. He goes, yeah, but today's not that day. Right. So I believe that the pursuit of knowledge, being a lifelong learner. I mean, I have a life goal to learn biblical Hebrew and Greek so I can read original texts in the Bible. That's just a personal life goal of mine. But you know what? I'm not there yet. It requires me to learn Hebrew and Greek. And I'm not even on that road yet. So I have these goals. I want to set them out. In law enforcement, I'll set a short-term goal. Like I want to go home safe at the end of my shift because I told my wife I'd go home today. Some of those things, there are factors I can't control. Some of them I can. So what are the things I can control? And that's how I really get into my guys' hearts. Every first and third Tuesday and Thursday, I have 8 guys on my team. 2 of them spend an hour in the morning at the range because it's a double squad day. And I just made the decision, you guys need to train. No one does that. You know, you're going to train on your annual quals, right? You're going to go out there, I shot qual. So I have another year where I don't have to worry about my gun. And that's insanity. Then I asked these guys, talk about knowledge here. And Travis and I have had this conversation before too. I asked my senior guys, who I have 1 or 2 of them retiring this year after over 25 years. I said, hey, how would you guys define probable cause? You know, I mean, we break the 4th Amendment all the time based on probable cause. Like, what is your thought on that? And they laughed thinking I was kidding. I go, no, I want to hear what you guys think it is, because having just taught criminal law, there's a definition that we all pretty standardized know what it is. So what do you guys think? And they said, well, you know, when people do bad things, we'll know it. And that's how we know to take them to jail. And I looked at them and I said, are you guys aware that you're stealing people, you're kidnapping them, and you don't even really know why? So that launched me into this whole 4th Amendment crusade. I got 4th Amendment Fridays in my briefing. They're going to get ready for tomorrow for that. We got Tactical Tip Thursdays. That was today. And we've built out a year-long plan. I got a SWAT guy on my team. There's a year-long plan for tactics training. I have a year-long plan to make them more proficient. And I'll tell you what, kicking and screaming, if I only get my whole team together for 20 to 30 minutes a day, I want to use that time well. Then they see me in action, living that out every day with integrity. I talk about it, but then they see me do it. So yeah, knowledge is huge. You have to keep chasing that, because gone are the days, I tell the new people, where the department's going to give you everything you need for success. That wasn't true when you guys started, wasn't true when I started. It's not true today. You may get a brand new jacket and a new radio holder, but the things that are going to make you safe and let you keep your house, you have to go and get yourself. You have to make yourself a self-learned person.
Jeff, you've sort of coined this term courageous nobility, and I love it. We've talked about it a lot. Kind of talk to our audience about what that means.
So I was really inspired reading your book, Courageous Leadership, and you and I had a conversation about this. And I said, hey, I got to find a way to coattail that somehow. But I like the idea, because courage, to me, C.S. Lewis said, courage is the point of all characters at the point of testing. He's like, it's the beginning of everything at the point of testing. So courage matters. And what does courage mean? Well, depending on who you ask and where they sit on that spectrum, it's some sort of definition of, I'm just going to stand in the gap when others won't. Damn be the consequences. That could be one thing. And I would submit to you that having courage and being courageous means seeing the right path, seeing what you need to do, and then knowing that that has a higher value intrinsically than punishment, consequences for people that are around you. Now, when I think about nobility, the definition of nobility to me is having a high regard or a high esteem for something you place on another person or a value point. And I thought, I want to be a noble person. So what is nobility? How do I espouse nobility? How do I live that out? Well, it's integrity. And Travis, right? You had said, well, courageous nobility is integrity. It's living integrity out loud. It's not saying to somebody, because I have stuff on my walls. I got guys and gals coming, not even my squad, into my office saying, hey, can you talk for a second? I need some help. And why is that? because being a man of integrity with nobility, I courageously say, yeah, I recognize I'm going to get yelled at for pulling you off the street, but we're having this conversation. Just the other day, I sent a guy home. I said, go be with your family. You need that right now. Your marriage is not doing great. Go be with your family. And we were already at minimum. And I knew my lieutenant was not going to be pleased with my decision. But frankly, since I trained my lieutenant, I figured I had some share in that. But I also made the decision early on. I said, no, one of the things that my lieutenant is big about, he says, mission first, people always. So I can be a man of courageous nobility, and I can lead the way by saying little things like, yeah, you know what, I'm going to value people always. All right, we're going to be fine here. The next 2 more hours before shift coverage comes in, go home. And that guy, for him, it meant everything. His wife wrote me a thank you card. So courageous nobility means I'm going to see these things play out. My writings that I do, the articles that you've helped me with and that we put out together, all speak to the idea that there is a right and a wrong. I want to be on the side of right. And guess what? I'm active. I still work law enforcement. And I don't care if you don't like what I say. I don't care. It doesn't bother me that feathers get ruffled, and they do all around me. People always ask me, why are you not a commander yet? I go, well, there's probably stories behind that. But I know who I am. And I know whose I am. I know that's holding my line about things that are important with people. That's courageous nobility. That's integrity played out.
Now, I think, Jeff, when people hear these things called ethics or nobility or honesty and all these different things, you'll sort of get an eye roll. And I think part of that is because people get the impression that people are better than others. The truth is we all are sinners. We all fall short. We all have problems. So what would you tell the audience listener that's listening to this going, I know I got to do better. I know I have to do better. Where do they start? Because the past means nothing to me. You control the future. The past is over with. So where do they start?
Well, take a look at that guy that decided he was going to, mentally, what does it take for you knowing you were in prison for 10 years, recognizing the name of a guy who was once arrested you, to then talk to him like a person? I was thinking about that. Like, what does it take for that guy? How hard was that for that guy? So something in him said, you know what? I'm not going to let the past define who I want to be now in the future. And this man chooses to see me differently. I'm going to see myself differently. And so I think any good parent would tell their kids, hey, you know what? Don't touch the stove. It's hot. Be self-reflective. You did something wrong. Let's own it. Let's learn from it. And that's where you want to start. My wife's favorite thing to say is, well, don't be sorry. Be better. Okay, well, how do you get better? That's how you get better. Let's have a conversation. Well, I always try to push for the why. Like, why are we doing these things? And if you can get to it, the real reason is not the real reason. And you have to earn the right to be in someone's heart to get the real reason usually. But cops have it different because we see the raw, uncut film of life all the time. The blanket of reality is ripped off for us every single day with one another. Cops especially, we're just so attuned to getting to the heart of things that we are really honest, aren't we? With each other. That's right. You know what sucks? I think your wife's hot. I want to sleep with her. Or how about let's do this one? I'm having a hard day. I go, yeah, I can smell it on you. What do you mean? Because it's reeking. I can smell the alcohol. And they kind of look down. The guy's like, yeah, I got a drinking problem. And they just tell you these things because we just want to get right to the heart of the issue. At that point, when you realize you have something there, man, I would tell you it takes bravery and courage for you as the person listening to say, you know what? I don't judge you. I'm no better than you. I don't judge you. In fact, I'm going to walk with you. And that's the big issue, Travis, is that I don't think we see enough of that. You know what I'd love to see? I'd love to see a robust wellness program championed by executive leadership, focused on transparency and vulnerability, getting away from, as Brene Brown would say, the shame analysis game, so that people would feel free to come forward and say, yeah, this is really bugging me. And the commander goes, yeah, I was there. I got the wisdom and the lessons. I was there, man. Go talk to this guy. We don't seem to have that, do we?
Well, I'm sure the ICP has a pledge we can sign to make that right.
I have to give props to Travis for dropping the Grandmaster Oogway philosophical approach of, yesterday's history Tomorrow's a mystery and today's a gift. That's why they call it the present, right? I mean, that's kind of what I took from his message. So rock on, brother.
That was good.
Great stuff, Jeff. Great stuff. Man, we could go on and on. It's been a great conversation, fellas. Can't thank you enough, Jeff, for being here. Brian, as usual, great stuff. If you've been watching, you've been listening to the Bravery Blueprint, check us out, thebraveryblueprint.com. Subscribe, tell your friends, and we will see you next time.